Hi and welcome. In this video we're going to create an application using a storyboard. Now we have a choice when we create an application. We can use a storyboard or we can use the traditional zip file to create our views. A storyboard is just a simplistic or a simplified way of creating views and hooking them together. And it also does some coding for us behind the scenes with view controllers and views. So it's a very good way, a storyboard is a very good way to quickly prototype an application that we can add to as we go along. It takes some of the load of the view controller and view away from the developer so the developer can concentrate on the model and its hookup. So let's look at just creating a simple Hello World application with a storyboard. I'm going to use a single view application in this case, and I'll click Next, and then I'm going to call this app Hello Storyboard, like that. And you notice that I've got this Use Storyboards checkbox selected, and I'll click Next. It's going to ask me for where I want to save and create my project, so I'm going to create it here in the Chapter 4 video folder. And here we go. Now, if I look down my navigator panel, I see that I have an app delegate, H&M. I have a view controller assigned already. This is because we use the single view template. And I have, instead of a nib file or a zib file, I have this file called mainstoryboard.storyboard. Now, if I look at this file, it will come up in Interface Builder, and it looks very similar to what I get if I'm using a nib file or a zib file, and in fact it is. I have a view controller. This is arranged in a view controller scene, and I have a view controller, and I have a UI view. Now notice that there is an arrow, and this arrow that comes from nowhere and ends up here at my view controller scene, my first scene, indicates that when the application is started, this is the scene that will be loaded and displayed. Now I can do the same thing that I would do in a regular application. So I'm going to drag out a label, and I'm going to drag out a rounded rect button. I'll change the text on the button to say hello. And then in my view controller, I'll need a property. Now this will be the property, the outlet property for the label. And so outlet properties we know should be non-atomic and weak. And it will be IB outlet, UI label, and it's a pointer, and we'll just call it hello label. And then I'm going to need an action method for the button to respond to, and we know that that's going to return type IB action, which is void, and then we'll call it BTN touched, for instance. Now the type, I'm going to explicitly type this object as a UI button. It's a pointer type. And then sender is fine. That's the default. And now I'll save this file, go back to my storyboard, and in the same way that I would hook up elements on a zip file, I'm going to hook up the elements of the storyboard. Now here, this does not say files owner. If we click this, we can see that this view controller is of type view controller, which is this view controller type. And if I right click on the view controller, I can see that I have the same kind of dialog box that I had before, and I can grab hello label, drag it to the label, and I can drag button touched to my say hello button, and then select touch up inside, just as we've always done. So far there's no difference between working with a zip file and working with storyboard. I'll select my view also and go over here and then choose a color, and maybe we'll make this kind of a real light yellow color. for today. There we go. And now, all that remains is to synthesize this property, just as we would before, and to write an implementation for my button touch method. So we have hello label that will synthesize in our implementation. Of course. And then let's just go ahead and grab my action method without the semicolon. I'll copy that and paste it here. And then what do I want to do? I want to say self.hellolabel.text is equal to @hello, like that. Okay. And now I'm done. So if I run this, this will all work. And this was a very quick way to set up. It was really no quicker than setting up a zip file, but you see it works, and we're all done. However, the detail or the difference is that if I look in my app delegate, if I look here in application did finish launching with options, which is the place in a zip file or a zib oriented application where we would instantiate the view controller, make it a child of the main window, make window key invisible, and so on and so forth. All we do here is return yes, and it still works. Why is that? Well, this is because when we use a storyboard, the compiler actually compiles the storyboard settings into our application, into the UI application singleton. And that takes the burden off of us. However, there's a lot of hiding going on here. And if we have a simple application, which, let's face it, most iPhone applications are fairly simple, at least in concept, we can use a storyboard. There are very, very few things that we really must use a nib for. Storyboards will get us very far. And so from here on out, where possible, we're going to be using storyboards. Now, let's take this one step further. I'm going to add some code and some pieces to this, and then I'll resume the video when after I've finished with that. Okay, so we're back. I've added a button here called New Scene. Now notice that in my view controller, there is not an action method for this scene, for this button. Now the storyboard is going to handle the interactivity here. What do I mean by that? Well, you can see I've added a new view controller scene. And the way I've done that is I have dragged out a view controller object from my menu over here into this area. And you can see that that adds another scene. And in this case, it added a third scene. We really don't want that. But it adds it to my storyboard. Now, I really don't want that view controller, so I can delete it. But I have added this second scene. I've changed the color of its view to this blue color. And I've dropped a label on this new view just to say that it's another scene, so that we know that we've changed view controllers. Now the question is, how are we going to get from the first view controller to the second view controller when we click the New Scene button? If I hold Control, and let's get both view controllers up here. If I hold down Control and then click and drag from the New Scene button to my other view controller, we see that here, it selects, and if I drop, I have an action segue being created. And I have a choice, push, modal, or custom. In this case, I'm going to choose modal, and we're going to talk a lot about this in coming sessions. But I want to choose modal because this new view controller is going to become a modal view controller that is displayed on top of this view controller. And we see that we have this interesting looking thing, an arrow with this indicator in it. And this indicator is a modal segue from new scene to, and if I hover that, I believe, or maybe we want to drag this out, from new scene to view controller. New scene is the button here. We can see that. And this view controller is here. Now, notice something. The view controller or its view, neither object is represented in code. I have a view controller here that I have defined in a segue. I have a view that is a member or part of that view controller defined in a segue, but nowhere in the code is there any indication that this view controller actually exists. This view controller will be compiled from the storyboard. And at this point, the application will run. Also notice that there is no code behind this new scene button. If we have a button and its only responsibility is to pop up a modal view controller, in this case that's its only responsibility, then we don't need any code as an action method to actually push that modal view controller. Will it run? Of course it'll run, because in the segue is compiled as part of the storyboard. So again, I can say hello with this button, and this is responding to an action method, and I can say new scene, and this will respond to the compiled action method from the storyboard. So as we can see, this is a very powerful and simple way to quickly prototype applications. And there are ways to get these segues to respond in different ways. There is a method hook of the view controller, which is a delegate method of the view controller, that we can trap the segue as it happens and do some different things. And we'll explore those types of detail greatly as we proceed throughout the course. So this has been an introduction to segues in storyboard scenes. Thank you very much.